Welcome, our Benvenidas. Welcome back to Tech and Tequila. Depending on when you're watching this, or listening, I should say, buenos dias, buenas tardes, or buenas noches. I'm super excited to have you back. So if you haven't ever listened to Tech and Tequila, a double welcome because this is your first time. And we are the podcast where cutting edge technology meets smooth conversation, just like your favorite adult beverage. My personal choice, of course, is tequila. I'm your host, Kat Lopez-Shelby, the founder and CEO of Shelby Technology Solutions, or AKA your Techie Chica. I'm ready to guide you through the latest tech innovations, industry insights, and behind-the-scenes stories that everything that's happening in the tech world. Each week, we'll explore the fascinating intersection between technology and business, all while enjoying a glass of tequila or your personal favorite non-alcoholic beverage, Miss Jenna, for you. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of tech. Cheers to another episode of Tech and Tequila. Welcome, and bienvenidos. Thank you for joining us on the podcast, Tech and Tequila. If you don't know who I am, I'm Kat Lopez-Shelby, and I'm the founder and CEO of Shelby Technology Solutions. But more importantly, you're here for Tech and Tequila, where we learn a lot about tech and we may have some nice tequila drinks while we're at it. If you're new here, Tech and Tequila is all about everything technology based for your business. So what that means is we have suppliers on here to talk about how they can help you grow your business. We, have mindset coaches on here talking about how to help you grow your business. We're all about business and basically introducing you to different suppliers and different ways that help you within your business. So I am super excited. We decided we would have a take two, so to speak, or part deux, because we had Jenna on last week, and I don't think that we were able to truly cover everything that we could. And so we have Jenna back, and we also have round two of Ken Euphorics today. Now, I personally have the Ken Spritz, which I'm going to read to you from the box, because if I don't, I'm going to get it wrong. And I'm definitely not going to say I'm not going to say the adaptogens, because that would just be all kinds of fun. I highly recommend looking it up. But what I like about this one is that this one is just kind of meant to elevate your mood, smooth out stress, and everything with a boost of energy. So there's that. I don't know what you have, Miss Jenna, but this is the one that I picked up.
I got the Bloom. And first of all, I was so excited to see all of these, which I didn't think you would buy them at the liquor store, but that's where the best place to get it. And honestly, I already tried a different kind last night, the Lightwave. It was amazing. And the adaptogens are so unique in each one of the different formulations for the purpose that they have. So I have Bloom, which is like a heart opening, feeling like being more yourself thing. I haven't opened or tried this one yet. So that's for today.
Well, perfect. So because this is Tech and Tequila, and while I do love a good non-alcoholic beverage, I've decided to mix it up a little bit. And I decided I would bring my good old friend right here, Fletcher. It's actually Fletcher Azul. I don't know why I just say Fletcher. Reposado. And I'm going to have an ounce of this with the Ken, because in my personal opinion, Jenna, please do not run it for me. I think that tequila has some good probiotic stuff going on with it. And we're not saying in large
everything
doses,
in moderation.
Everything in moderation. There
and
you go.
Honestly, if we had started with another type of alcohol, you might have been able to sway me a little more, but tequila is the one that gets me into trouble in the past. So we're definitely not doing that one, but good for you. And there are some benefits. I won't ruin it.
Yes. And I will say this. So if you have never heard about Flecho Azul before, I have the Reposado, which is, the reason it is a Reposado is because how it's aged and how it's actually processed. And so a Reposado, just to let you know, which means rested in Spanish, is typically a tequila that is aged in an oak barrel or storage tanks for a minimum of 2 months, but typically up to 12 months. And that gives it a distinct flavor and color. And you'll notice if you look at this, it's like a pretty amber color. And it gets that from either aging in the barrel or just the time that it's aged, right? And a little bit about Flecho. So number one, Flecho is actually based out of the lowlands of Jalisco, Mexico, is where it is, brought in from. This one particularly actually recently won the prestigious San Francisco World Spirits Competition. And it is crafted from the fully mature blue Weber agave, which I just said earlier was grown in the lowlands of Jalisco, Mexico. Now, the one thing about this is that of course they have a proprietary blend when they make it, but the magic happens because there's three ingredients. So it's 100% hand harvested agave, a proprietary yeast strain, and pure volcanic water. That's it. No additives, no glycerin, no sugar-based syrups, and definitely no artificial coloring. So it is tequila in its purest form. And in case you don't know, Flecho Azul is also owned by, or co-founded and owned by, the gentleman Aaron Marquez and the golfer Abraham and Sir. And I'm sure that you have seen it around. It's the distillery it's made out of was established in 1926. So as soon as I get this bad boy open, which I may have to have Mike come help me, I'm going to put this in my cup. We're going very high
water though.
Very high fashion here. And Mike can, and we can get started. Maybe.
Do you need a tool?
I need a tool. That's what I need. I need a tool, which actually plays into what we are going to discuss today. So for sure, I definitely need a tool. But yes, I need a tool. I'm getting there. We're getting there with the tools that I have. Now, if I get this bad boy off.
They're really unique tasting. Like, I really like them. I wasn't sure what to think with the ingredients being so on the making sense of a nutrient side. Thought it's gonna, open a big vitamin smelling thing. But this is really, really good. Have you tried them yet?
I have, and I will tell you. So I like the Bloom. I think it's very lightweight. The one that I haven't found or been able to try, because just for the record, you can obviously go to Google Can Euphorics and look online. They carry them here at the Specs, which is one of the local liquor stores, but they also carry them at Target.
Okay.
So, and they did not have I think is it Lightwave is what it's called.
Right. That's the one that we got. I have some of that in the refrigerator as well, of the two that I got. And I had one of those last night. It's a very unique flavor. I recommend. I could say that one is, nothing else tastes like it. And it's almost got like a clove finish, like very, very unique. And it really does allow it to be a modern ritual, right? Like, so allowing it to put a change of pace in your day instead of, just going through and not having any breaks. Sometimes we lean on unhealthy things to do that. So it was really nice to be like, oh, cool. I feel like I'm doing something crazy. And it's just a nice little drink.
Yeah. And that, I will say, that's one thing I like about these, because obviously, so they have the one that is called Sunshine. And when I think of it, this is like your morning drink that you take maybe in the morning, or like for a little pick me up throughout the day. And then I think of Bloom and Spirits as kind of like a midday kind of thing, maybe mid-afternoon. And then that one would be great for in the evening. Like I really like that one. And I do agree. I like the taste of them. There isn't one that I've tasted that I'm like, oh, how I won't call out the specific alcoholic beverage that I had once, but there is a particular beverage that I had once and I was like, oh, this is medicinal. Like there is no way around this being medicinal. I actually had sent it to somebody and I thought, man, I got to apologize because this is not a fun drink. This one is not fun.
Well, I was hoping when you mentioned this being an option, I was really hoping, I'm picky as picky can be. And I was just, I like to come back with a good review. No problems with this. Like seriously, so unique, so well thought out. And it doesn't there's a lot of other drinks that are similar on the market that throw a bunch of other things in there. Like, well, if we've got a little bit of bang, let's put some more. But then they kind of counteract what the activity is, like too much for one place. but these are really well thought out. And I think that was really good. You should do a sales pitch for them. Really. It's like, you could be drinking it all day, boo. You know?
I know. Well, no. And I do, like, I think you can. And of course it's non-alcoholic. It's meant to kind of elevate your mood, obviously, me, cause I like to Google and look things up. I looked it up, and what Ken says, like, their big thing is that, they have adaptogens, um, antioxidants, which of course, and anti-inflammatory properties, which is kind of their whole goal is to help you manage. Remember how I said I don't like to use the S word, but we call it pressure. But they say to manage stress kind of throughout your day and give you kind of a boost, right? What they want to do is use the ingredients and kind of this uniqueness, the blend that they have, to create this, like, I don't want to use the term mood altering, mood uplifting, activating power to give you energy and peace within. And
well, yeah, like the social environment, what we're trying to mimic in a lot of the other situations is just allowing ourselves to be, this one's like more heart-centered, more open. What's really interesting is I think it's also very responsible from my side of the things. They have a limit on how many to have a day, because just because it's natural supplementation doesn't mean it's not working and it's not going to do a lot for you, and you could go on the other side of things.
Yeah.
So I thought there's a lot of drinks out there that don't have like the foresight to go ahead and mention, you probably shouldn't have more than 4 of these at a sitting.
Yeah.
But I think that was a really responsible thing, because they're really effective supplementations, things that I would prescribe in unique doses for, patients when we're doing functional medicine stuff. So it's kind of a cool crossover or whatever.
Yeah, it's a cool little crossover. It's a nice thing. I think it's a great, I want to say hangout, but like, it's a great, like, bring it to the party for someone who, say, doesn't want to drink for whatever the reason is. As well as, like I said, it kind of gives you something to sip on all day. And
it can be a mixer for your tequila. Like
that's right. And it
was in the mixer section.
For my concoction, it's good. I probably should have at least tasted it without the tequila in it, because I can definitely taste the tequila. But I also, I like the taste of tequila, so it doesn't bother me. But yes, so
that's good. That's good.
That's what I will say. And I will say the one that you have, the bloom, definitely reminds me of like a rosé. It has a floral herb kind of vibe to it.
It does. It feels like fresh and light, and inspired by your favorite all-day rosé, only dreamier.
Yeah. Only dreamier.
You knew.
Yeah, you're not going to wake up having any issues. I love it. I wanted to kind of go from here to talk about something that I know we did not cover last time, that I think is so beneficial for anybody who is heading into this like digital nomad style. Right. So for anyone who missed episode 1, definitely go watch the first of this, where we kind of talk more in depth about, living in community, how to decide what kind of digital nomad you want to be, how to think, like, open your mind up to the so many different options of being a digital nomad and what that looks like. And what we didn't have a chance to cover because of time constraints, and just because we don't want to have a 3-hour podcast. I mean, maybe if we're drinking a bunch of tequila, 3 hours would be okay, but I don't think people want to listen to that.
The late night version.
That's the late night version is what we'll call it. We'll do like one of those one day, and we'll have like the late night version live, where we just sit and like have like me and a bunch of other people around that have been on the podcast, and we just go through everything. We talk about it all.
Nice.
But one of the things that we did not get to is, once you've had this chance to say, hey, this is really something I'm interested in. It's something that I'm, looking into. I have made the decision, like, I want to be more of like, I want to enjoy the culture. I want to be here. I think once someone has thought through, like, okay, I want this lifestyle, I really have nailed down, like, either I want to move every 2 weeks, or I want to be somewhere for 3 months, or I want to be somewhere for a year. What does that next step in the planning process look like? Like, what are your recommendations as far as that?
Well, I will say that, of course, it's always going to be unique, but there are some things that are going to be the same across the board. So that's where we would start. This is actually really similar to the way that I would do any lifestyle planning. Is first clear up your ideas of what has been or what you think you're going to do immediately, right? Because when you make that decision of the big vision, you have, of course, inadvertently picked up little ideas or topics or how you would do it, why you would do it. And a lot of that can be jumbled up in the big vision. So I think it's always good to take a moment to tidy up and say, okay, these are all the things I wanted. These are all the things that I've heard. But let's like clean that up. What do I really want? How do I see my day? I was actually talking to my eldest son about going through colleges and picking a career and saying it's a lot of times we choose it based on how it sounds, how it looks for someone else, what we've seen done, what we've heard done. And we say, I'm going to end up here. But you can't ever follow that exact same path. So when you think about where you're going to end up more heavily than how you're spending your days now and how you hope to spend your days as you move forward, you can kind of get tangled up and waste a lot of time and money. So we see a lot of people start on this journey only to a few months later say, never mind, I don't want to do it. So I think the first thing to do is to kind of empty out the preconceived notions and the thought of how you're going to do it after you realize you're going to do it. So that all needs to be there so that you can realize that you want to do it. But like you said, after you've decided, I think you need some space to realize it's going to be completely new for me. And then there's this period once you have that space in really shopping and looking at every single option, saying, what would it be like to stay, longer periods in the States? What would it be like if I moved? What would it be like if I got this type of position? What would it be like if I talked to my current job about modifying things? What would it be like if, so allow yourself to do all of what would it be like without stopping yourself. And here's the kicker, without taking steps to make that decision right now. Because sometimes we get really, really excited in that shopping phase and we hit buy way too fast. And then we're in a country we didn't actually think we don't like the food, like I'm stuck here for a year eating jalapenos and bread or whatever, right? So,
oh my goodness, I don't know why that always makes me think of, but I want to make this very clear. I personally have not visited a lot of the United Kingdom, but it's like when I think, if I'm going to visit a country, do I need to take hot sauce with me? Or like, it's not spicy. And it always reminds me when I worked at AT&T, which has been a while back, when I worked in the retail location, my partner in my desk that was right in front of me, she was from England. And she told me, obviously her daughter was probably like 8 or 9. And she's like, I have to tell you, every time we get back to the States, because in case you don't know this, which I'm sure a lot of people do, McDonald's and other things are not the same when you're in other places, right? She said that her daughter would run in and see a McDonald's and be like, my America, and my food that I can eat, because she would miss those things that I say, obviously, we shouldn't be eating McDonald's every day, but we all know that, occasionally everybody goes and has a McMuffin or whatever. But staples that you think about,
right.
and it makes me think, I have another friend that lives in Dubai, and her mom would send her care packages with tortillas and stuff like that, things that you don't think.
Hey, in Costa Rica, they don't have pinto beans, which doesn't seem like a big deal. There's so many other foods, so many things, but that's what I would miss. I was like, there's those little things, and the spices and salsas, they're not the same salsa. It's good, but it's not the same. And it is a learning curve. It's good enough. However, you could end up in a country where you don't like any of the food. And that's, I don't know. I guess you'd get used to it eventually. I guess that's the exposure part of it. But I do think that just shopping around and knowing what are all of the opportunities available? Then after you shopped around, you'll see okay, this country is easier to get into. If I'm going to work in the United States, these states have the best programs for me to stay at. These have the most co-working units, or it's the easiest for me to get connection where I need to get connection, which is you'll talk to your tech advisor about. But I mean, I think there's a lot of things in that shopping phase before you decide that needs to be a longer phase, an observational phase. I think people, when they're ready to make the plans, they want to decide and do it and go. And I think that the observation side of that, if it's longer, if you allow yourself to have a bigger vision, allow yourself to sit in that vision and to play out how it feels instead of what someone else has done or what you think you might do. I think that's the biggest part. And then integrating it in is a process. It's not a one day. I think a lot of times we imagine in our head like a diet. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up and this is how it's going to be, right? The reality of it is tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do one little thing that gets me closer there. I'm going to get one little thing that gets me closer there. So that's kind of helpful to have a checklist or a guideline of something, the basic things and systems that are put in place, which is something that we're working on now to make it all together, make it a lot easier, because it is kind of a confusing thing to say, what are the practical steps? If I want to leave in 12, 16, 20, 24 weeks, what's my timeline? If I want to move into a more remote position here in the stateside, what's my timeline? And really, even though there's 3 million different places you can go and ways you can do it, the steps are still pretty similar of how to think through it and to take your time doing the research, what fits your life best, and then integrating it in so you don't end up, which we see a lot of failed digital nomad stories, right? And I think that's what keeps people from doing it, is there's just as many failure stories, if not more, than the success stories. It seems right now it's been so new. So I think that the most important thing is having some sort of a system of a guideline of how it's been done, and then remembering that it needs to be individualized to you. And that's a day-to-day thing. It's not an all of a sudden tomorrow will be changing. Because if you're waiting for that, you'll never go.
Well, and I think too, to add to that is there needs to be a thought process of like, and this is more some of the back end planning. Like, okay, so if I'm going to live this digital nomad lifestyle, am I going to put my things in storage or am I going to sell all my stuff? Because sometimes there's going to be what we call like, I don't want to say like the time bomb, but the ticking clock where you're like, oh, my lease is up on this time. Or, if you own your home, it's like, okay, what is it going to take? Like, what is it going to take to get this house ready so I can put it on Verbo or I can put it on, Airbnb?
Right.
And can I find a property management company? Like all these steps along the way are moving you in the right direction. And I think that's the thing. You want to have a plan, you want to work that plan, you're going to have what we like to call bumps along the way. But the thing is, you want to every day make a step like you're headed towards that, and to me, this kind of aligns with the idea of like quantum leaping, right? Our favorite topic here, but it's to interact with things, not as like who I am today, as who I want to be tomorrow. Like, really think through how like your process with everything. But I think that is like absolutely a good idea, and I think some of it has to do with dipping your toes in. Like, okay, so you say, I want to live this digital nomad lifestyle, is there a way that if I want to do this internationally, can I go visit that place for 2 weeks first and see, do I like the food? Can I tolerate it? Like, what is my concern? And some of it can just be maybe not visiting and going online, but talking to people that have already done it, that have been in that like community of it.
Right.
And thinking about and I always think of weather like as a big thing, because you and me are like, we're similar. Like, I don't want to go below 70. I mean, obviously in Texas, it does go below 70, but
that's when I leave.
It's like the international version of a snowbird. All right, we're below 70. I'm out. Peace. But thinking about that, because different seasons, where was I thinking of? There's like monsoon seasons. There's, which we don't necessarily have monsoon seasons, obviously, here in the United States, but, we have hurricane season.
It is,
we have
right?
tornado season and stuff like that. Yeah. So there's other things to think about.
No, I think that the biggest part on this really is getting a very clear, I think we were talking about this on a separate subject the other day, is getting a very, very clear vision and then having a system in place, a system that, has been accounted for in the same type of pathway that you're going, because it won't ever be the same. But like I said, it's not the same. It's a similar system that you can plug into. We've gone from selling our house. We sold our house in 5 hours. full shipping container. So I actually got into drayage and logistics because of that. So that is additional knowledge points that if you have all of the time and space and energy in the world, totally do it yourself and find those things out. If you have the ability to use resources that are available to make that streamlined, then you'll have an if this happens, then that will happen. And if that doesn't happen, then I can do this instead of what will I do now? I hope I can figure it out. And those are the parts that get panicky and stressful. I hate it, but it's true as far as like the digital nomad thing. And when you said like practice and go live somewhere and do that stuff, there's so much more to that. Do it while you're working. Don't do it on vacation to see if you're going to like it when you're working, because it's completely different how you're going to be living there. And there is a level of practicality that comes along with being a dreamer and understanding that those systems in the back end, how am I going to keep my stuff secure when I'm across the globe? How am I going to make sure that my clients' information is being transmitted to them in a timely manner and it's safe? Those things are the stuff that you don't necessarily think of when you're like, I wonder what country I'd like the best, or I wonder what state I'll start with first, you know? So it'll make a big difference on which countries you select, what your timeline is, what states you're going to move to, what type of employment contracts you're going to accept. Those will all make a big difference in your plan. So like putting that back end system consideration will make your plan more successful. And I'll tell you, I love rainy season, and there's a lot of places where the off season is amazing, but that'll be a personal preference. So going through and working with someone who kind of has a knowledge base on that can save you so much time instead of try and fail, try and fail, try and fail, try and fail, try and fail. 12 years later, did it, guys, but I want something else because it took me so long. I think it's really beautiful that, you know, we do have this first wave of digital nomads that's already been the successful wave, right? So we do have a lot of resources that are available for people to use.
Well, and I think it's important, you know, we have this first wave or lots of people that have experienced this lifestyle, right? And I think the secondary thing is to really think through, you know, like you said, this is not a vacation. Like spend 2 weeks, find out from your work, can I go here and work at the same time? Because I will tell you right now, you know, I can work at Playa, like, you know, Cabo, Playa del Carmen, wherever, just as well as I can personally work here. And in fact, I'm an ocean beach person, so I absolutely love it. But maybe you discover that, okay, maybe we can't be at the beach, or maybe I have to have like where I have to travel to go to the beach. I need to have like a home base or, you know, some type of co-working space to work out of, because I need to have that for my person, you know.
Right.
I always say this. So like I was the one person in 2020 that was like, nope, I need an office. There's too many people in this house. It's too people-y. And anytime that like, because I myself mostly work from home, you know, like the rest, I would say the rest of the world, but a lot of people work from home now. If I'm feeling stuck or I'm having trouble moving something forward, I will go out to like a coffee shop or a co-working environment or my actual office and sit in it for a little while, because getting that change of scenery can like make a world of difference sometimes.
Oh, 100%. And you know, it's really interesting when you're talking about being at the beach. I had 2 different beach locations came up to me because, you know, we stayed 17 different unique locations over the 3 years. And one of the locations was right across the street from the beach, and it had a condo with a balcony that had like a private area on the balcony. So I could look at the beach all day and work. That didn't give me any problem whatsoever. I was fine. I did all the work, did so well that month. Actually, it was one of my favorite months ever. There was another place we were closer to the beach. I couldn't see the beach, and we had an outdoor kitchen. So I didn't really have my own distinct space. I was working outside. So ended up, you know, these are things you don't think to calculate ahead of, but there was an additional expense that month because the way that I was able to work was to rent like a little studio condo for 3 weeks, so recluse myself in there. It had a beach view because now I can see the beach, I'm fine, and get all of that done. So there's always a solution to the issue, but I do think it's a lot different going on vacation, going to chill, and then going to realize this is part of my work where I don't want to be unhealthfully working all the time. yet I do need to get my purpose out there. I need to fulfill the things that I am promising to fulfill. How can I do that best? And you're right, everyone's going to do it a little bit differently, which is why it's nice to have a system of if this, then that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I always use the example. My son used to work remote for a company and he was a customer service rep. And he literally worked out of his closet. Like he redid the closet so he could sit a desk in there and close the door just so that there was like, when he was on, and he didn't have any distractions. I mean, those are kinds of things you want to think about. There is something that you touched on that I want to touch on a little bit more because I think in this day and age, when you are looking at this lifestyle, a secondary thought and planning process needs to be about your tech stack, about your security. And obviously, I always say, as it's not the sexiest thing, you want to talk about connectivity. But when you go past your connectivity, it's like, okay, what type of applications am I using? Am I using WhatsApp? Am I using Voxer? Am I
Right.
going to get a universal SIM card once I step off? Like, do I need to change my phone numbers? Or, and depending on if you're doing remote work, contract work, what you're doing, Ring Central for the most part works almost anywhere in the entire world. So if your company has Ring Central, you should be able to take that with you and utilize it, but you still have to have connectivity.
Right.
And I always say there's a lot of options out there for things that we traditionally think of as more a brick and mortar,
Mm.
because we think of brick and mortar is like, okay, you have brick and mortar. So then you have a firewall and you have this type of security, but there's cloud-based firewalls that you can utilize for yourself and your company. So whether your team is, you're a solo entrepreneur or you have like 20 people that you work with on your team, there's different solutions. Are there any particular, technology applications or software that you found really helped you when you were working remote or things that worked well?
Most definitely, I'll say, first of all, that connectivity that was set up initially. I think Ring Central is a great thing to mention as far as being able to get an actual dialable phone number through a number of different international territories. And so I think that was really helpful for me when we had that. I think that it's really important, as you mentioned, to understand what type of connectivity you're going to have at each country or in each location. Sometimes even locations within the United States can be very different as far as connectivity. I'm an hour away from Austin currently, and the connectivity here is different. So it's just understanding more about, especially if you're going to another country, I'll say the main thing is that your phone is going to connect as a phone number. And I don't know how this works on that side, but all of the apps that you download, anything that you need to have your two-factor authentication for, if you don't have a number that recognizes as a phone number, so it won't go through your WhatsApp or, your different route, it has to come through as an SMS. And I'm not sure, I don't know all the side of that, but I would say on my side, even to like wash my laundry when I was at like a really nice building in a city in Costa Rica, there you have to get a ping back to be able to get your app on to wash your laundry. So it's that little thing of that connectivity of having an actual connected phone number somewhere that you can get attached to that you don't think is that big of a deal, but nothing else will work in many cases if it's got authentication factors, if you don't have that. So I would say that, first of all, is just something to think about. I will say that for my business, I use a lot of WhatsApp Business. I feel like it has kept everybody in contact. If you find, it's more of a social into a business network, which is really nice. It's anywhere that I am. Everyone has a WhatsApp if we're international, for sure. Less so in the States. However, I think that it's picking up a little bit. I think that's really helpful. I also have apps that deal with my human design. I have apps that deal with my self-care. And I've been trying a couple of different ones out to report which ones are best. But there's a few that look really promising just to keep you on a schedule, because when you're in a new place every day or every month, or however you decide, how quickly you decide to move, keeping some of those like general self-care rhythms are more important for business than you think. I can't really run my business if I'm taking care of myself. I don't know where I am in the world as far as my center. So I feel like that's really important to think about. And then lots of course, your social media is so important now with just being able to connect to people. It's not even a marketing or a community or any one thing anymore. It's just being able to show up in the world. I think that shows us more than anything how important being a digital nomad is, how important your avatar is, and how important building your presence there in your social media, your social media apps, all of your different places is really good to think about. And then the last thing I'll say is language. You can translate all day long, but I would say getting an app. I really like the app Fluent U, which is it uses actual media clips to go back and teach you to have understanding. It's been one of the best things, though, that I'm learning a new language and I want to use it practically. It actually starts to stick and I can use it more. Of course, translate apps are great. They're amazing. We can communicate not very well, but well enough with each other. It's hilarious the type of conversations you end up having with some of those mistranslations. I do think if you're going to travel somewhere for a long term that they don't speak the language, I would totally recommend doing something like Fluent U that helps you become more fluent in that space. Those are the apps that I think of. It's like I'm thinking digital nomad stuff. And I'm sure there's a lot more. But I would say those are the things that I automatically jump to besides all the community fun stuff on the side.
Yes, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I know we spoke about Ring Central, but just as, if you didn't know this, but Zoom has a phone app that you can have and others. But yes, it is integrally important to understand, will your phone number receive those messages? Is it going to work? And, if you're from the States, there are options within some of the major cell phone companies to take your phone number wherever you're at. And, my biggest experience with this is obviously in Mexico, and I'm fine. It's not expensive. Where I have had clients that have been very dissatisfied with the pricing is on cruise ships, and that is a separate entity because if you're on a cruise ship, you pay so much per day to connect to the cruise ship's Wi-Fi, which is a whole different thing. And I was going to say, I'll put them in the comments, but you can look on YouTube and Google like a day in the life of a cruise ship person. And there's several different videos where people who actually work on cruise ships talk about that being one of their expenses, because even though they work on the cruise ship, their Wi-Fi is not like included and it's not free. So they have to pay for that as well. But that's where I have experience. Not that you never know. Maybe you're going to decide to go on.
I was like, whoa, I didn't think about that.
Yeah. Maybe you're going to decide to do one of those like 365-day cruise things where it goes all over everywhere and you're going to be in a different port every day and be working and stuff like that. But, those are where I've really experienced it. I lean on the fact, obviously, talking about like having a cloud-based firewall, something like Perimeter 81. I do like the WhatsApp because it does have double encryption on it, which is why it's, I would say, so popular. And I interact with a particular company that's based out of the UK, and one of their big things is, and how they interact with their customers all over the world is via WhatsApp. So they're auto sending out like advertisements and things like that. The other thing is, NordVPN, Surfshark, things like that are all great. And I like Google Drive, but I think if you're looking for like more security and some of those items, I'm a big proponent of like Dropbox and looking into that, because you can always share the link with somebody else, have them come in. And depending on who you're working with, like especially nonprofits get a discount for Dropbox, just FYI.
I was wondering, I was like, when I was working in organizations for school, when pharmacy school, and I was doing legislative activities, that was always what we used. And I guess I haven't. It's good to have these things like brought up again so that you know all your options. We were talking about like shopping for where you're going to go. You also need to shop for the tools you're going to use and not just jump on the ones you're familiar with, because there might be a better tool for you in your specific situation. Like I actually got a survey the other day about all of these new developments that they're doing for file sharing. And so it's really very relevant from my mindset to hear you saying about that they all have different qualities, different storage limits, different security, and different abilities to add on to the sharing in different ways. It's really interesting that's why you need someone to know all of it, because there's no way.
Well, and I think of it like, we're talking about storage. And I think of like the biggest analogy that I can think of is if you look at different co-location centers where people like actually, store or they co-locate at, you can have one co-location that has like level 2 security, but you can have another co-location center that has level 3, 4 security and, house DOD, Department of Defense and stuff like that within them. Um, and using that analogy, you want to think of your security as a layered approach. There's not just like one and done,
Mhm.
so I always say firewall, email security, because I cannot tell you the number of like supposed QuickBook requests and things that I get on a daily basis. And obviously always say this, what's between the floor and whatever the device is your first line of defense. And that's training, because we're human. So if we're not,
Mhm.
let's say as I have been guilty of, proofreading messages real quickly or missing a message, you know, if you get a request to open something, whatever it is, always look at the line of who it comes from and open it up. Because if it's Gmail, it's not coming from QuickBooks. It's not coming from one of these
Mhm.
places.
So is there different training? I really think that this will be something that we'll dive into as we move
Hmm.
forward with all of the fun stuff we're putting together. What are the differences really when someone's working for a company or for someone else and they're thinking about the security versus when, I think a lot of times it kind of goes under the radar is it doesn't seem as important until you get big and that's too late. When you're doing your own content creation, you have your own online business, you're kind of running everything yourself. What are the big differences in preparation that you have when you're a solo entrepreneur or have a small business or a content creator, influencer, anything like that, versus having some sort of a set employment with an outside company?
I think it's going to depend on how they contract you. And I always use the example. I have a customer that does a lot of 1099 employees, but for their 1099 employees, for every single one of those employees, they get a domain based email.
Okay.
So even though they're a 1099 employee, they have an email that ends with for the privacy of the company, we won't say which one, but they get an email that says such and such at, this company. And so, you know, at that point, you as the contractor and whatever you sign, you're responsible for securing your devices, which means that, you password protect, you don't leave
Okay.
your stuff just randomly all over places. Whenever there's an update, you go in and you update it. I mean, I cannot tell you the number one thing that I always advise people is like whether it's Apple, Windows to a much more extent or more often updates, is do the updates, because 9 times out of 10, they're catching itty bitty bugs or things that, leave spaces open. And this has been several years ago, but there was literally an update done by Apple and Windows because they found like a gaping hole in this particular print company's software where
Mhm.
they were going in and filling it so people couldn't get into people's devices. I always say whether you're a solopreneur or you're somebody who's contracted for a big company or you're an employee, it's still you want to train yourself on things to look for just out of the gates,
Well, it's funny that you said something about secure your devices, and I thought of a story, and I again won't call anyone out, but I've been in locations where a practitioner with medical information on their computer about someone's entire chart will be there. Like it's
Yeah.
it's shocking to me, but I think that it's not that shocking. You're so used to going through your day to day that you're not thinking of yourself at risk until it
Mhm.
happens, and we don't want that to happen. But just that securing your own device, it seems so simple, but training yourself on that is a bigger deal. I
Mhm.
mean,
And that's what I think of, because if, like, let's say you're a solopreneur, what I always tell people is the protection is similar for a solopreneur to an enterprise. The solution is really where the difference is. And I always use like I work with a company called Coro, and Coro will do one email, one device or 3 devices. Like they'll do more of like a solo, a small business. Well, I also work with companies that their minimum's 20, but what
mm,
they're doing is similar, like they're similarly protecting. I'm not going to say universally everything is exactly the same because
right,
everybody
right.
has their, differentiators, but like Exidium their minimum is like 20 devices. So it's
Okay.
like, okay, we're here, we need to have 20 devices. And really, to get to that device count is not really that large of a team when you think about it, because I don't know about yourself. Like, I have my phone, I have my computer, I have my tablet, I have,
Right.
but
There's five
it's
people in my family. I'm pretty sure we got the 20, you know?
exactly, exactly. But it's thinking about those, like, the need is similar,
Okay.
and I cannot emphasize enough what I talk with my clients about is the fact that, we can't all start on a Porsche budget, right? But
Right.
what we can do is we can start with, let's say, I personally have a Volkswagen, so we'll say a Volkswagen. We'll start with a Volkswagen and make a plan to be like, okay, this is what we want to implement in total. And a lot of times, depending on what your requirements are, having that plan in place and being able to show that fulfills a big portion of your requirements.
So this is what's really cool because you use an analogy that I use completely separately of saying like it doesn't matter with if you start with a Porsche or you start with like what do you call it, the El Camino, because El Camino can look real cool if you take care of it, right? It can be an
Mhm.
amazing. So it really is the plan that you have forward from wherever you're starting. And I think that's really
Mhm.
important. I think some people are intimidated to jump into doing it right because what's that going to be? I'm not 20 minimum devices to start. I'm not all the way there. And at what point do I start considering this as an expense that I'm putting in? But that's kind of like when do I start taking vitamins and eating right? Right?
Mhm.
Like the sooner you do it at whatever level you do it, the better it's going to be as you move forward. And so making instead of avoiding the truth that we want to be well rounded and protected and safe and feel secure in our online space, it's nice to hear that there's a different solution because a lot of times same thing with people's health. They're like, I can't do
Mhm.
all of this right now, it's too much. Well, let's start with what we can do and let's make sure we're taking care of you the best we can every
Mhm.
moment, right?
Yeah. And I think of the correlation is like for me personally. So I won't say never ever, but universally, I generally don't drink soda. That's just my personal thing. I'm not saying that the world has to give up soda, but I don't. But it's you make that one change, and you're like, okay, so I'm going to drink water and unsweet tea throughout the day instead. And you start with that change, and then you move forward. And
Right.
if you think about it in tech, what I always tell people is if you start by saying, okay, I'm ready to, eyes wide open, not eyes wide shut, to say, I want to know where my holes are, start with that, assessment. Let's find where your holes are, and then let's start to address one at a time, little by little.
I'm just like the marketing side of me can't stop. And all I can think of is is like where are my holes? Like where can you fix these? Because that really does put into perspective of like this type of shutting our eyes to things
Hmm.
mentality of shutting our eyes until it gets right in front of us. So it's the tidy up stuff. Even if you're gonna go, if you're gonna plan your life, if you're gonna plan your trip, if you're gonna do your tech, it's you have to
Hmm.
clear everything up so you can know what's there. You have to be really honest with what the bare floor looks like
Hmm.
before you want to put any new carpeting on top of it, right? Like you want to make sure it's completely visible. And I like that you said that eyes wide open because I
Hmm.
do think that we go into a lot of things being like, oh, just tell me it's not too bad instead of tell me how good I can be, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I always think about it, and that is a great analogy actually, is in construction, because anybody who's done construction or dealing with construction like myself, ugh, um, understands that like you go in and you're like, okay, we're just going to remodel this bathroom. Well, lo and behold, you've got leaky pipes, you've got a pipe in some crazy position, so you can't do what you want. And, or let's say you get into it and you're like, oh my gosh, we can just do this, 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 and this, and it's perfect. So, I think when you like look at, where your gaps are, you
Mm.
can make a plan to fill those gaps, and I really am a firm believer in, at least looking at things like having the perspective to be eyes wide open because, you know, I don't think there's literally a week that goes by that we don't hear about another big company that has had a data breach. So whether, and I keep wanting to say NPR, it's not NPR. You know, the most recent, which was a huge data breach, then you have like AT&T and you have Change Healthcare, and you think about all the financials that they put into that. And so I think that it's figuring out where your gaps are. And even if you don't have your gaps, I know that we talked about it a little bit in the last episode of the podcast. It's having a plan in place and testing that plan.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's like, okay, we got to take this computer online. Okay, we have to close this person's, you know, their profile. We've got to, these things have to be done. It's knowing that you can work that. And especially with traveling, it's understanding whether it's 2 a.m. in the United States, but it's 11 o'clock your time. Who do you get in contact with? What needs to happen, and how do you make sure that this is taken care of? And that is universal for whether you are working by yourself. It's like, what MSSP am I getting? And that's 2 S's, by the way. Am I getting in touch with? Or if you're contracted or you're like, let's say a W-2 that works remote, however that all transpires, you know, is knowing who do I contact right now to say this is what's going on, and knowing how to execute that plan.
So I will tell you that without getting into too much detail, this happened to me. And because you happened to say, you were the one that set up the system, I was not able to be physically there, and my location was being broken into. And I have an exact plan of who to call, what to do, step by step, because when you're on a mountain in another country and you hear that your, you know, scheduled drugs are being compromised, it's a big scary thing, right? And the emotional distress and the mental anguish that could cause if there's no solution in place. As a flip side to that huge event that was able to be handled and steps were able to be taken step by step, all recorded, all put down in the tech, that's awesome. Now, compared to just a little thing where I'm not able to get connected. I'll never forget this. Trying to get my laundry. I just couldn't get it, and I couldn't get anyone's connectivity. I didn't have a plan. I didn't think it was going to be a big deal to be in this location for the short period of time that I was in. So I didn't really plan ahead. I thought I was going to be cool. I didn't take that extra step to look through the checklist. And the distress that you can feel, I can't even explain to you when you just can't get connected to anyone anywhere and you feel very lost, right? And that took a lot of like lifestyle chill out, find a new thing. What would have been better is if, and now what I consistently do is always have that plan that you're talking about, to know what you're going to do in the case of, because most things won't ever get to that place as long as you have the plan. But if you don't have the plan for some reason, it shows you need it. So
exactly. No. And I think that was really what I wanted us to touch on today was, you know, the planning involved, different ways that you can help yourself, different software and solutions to look into. And, you know, not that it's necessarily a digital nomad thing, but, you know, a couple months back, for whatever transpired, you know, AT&T went down, and like I had companies that couldn't dispatch. I mean, you know, and I won't specifically state, but I talked to, you know, I used to work at AT&T. I talked to one of the AT&T people, and she was like, I just wanted to crawl under my desk and hide, because there was nothing that she could do.
Right.
And it always makes me think about the number of companies that I work with in West Texas that have AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile, because maybe AT&T doesn't work in this one location that they go out to or that, you know, they service, but T-Mobile works. And it's, you know, little things like having those kinds of backups. Or, you know, recently I just had Lumen on, and let's say your AT&T goes out, but you have their ERAS solution. So, you know, having that redundancy with someone else, you know, it really covers what you're talking about.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I hadn't even remembered that was a big deal, that we had a separate contract that had a separate type of hotspot, because there's also limited data in some countries of how much data you're allowed in each account. So there's lots of things to think about as far as redundancy. I think I'm actually like, I'm going to put that down on a whole section. That's a really, really good point. Those things that you want to consider, but there's so much to consider. Sometimes that's where a checklist, a guideline, a system, something that's proven that you're thinking of all of these little things is going to be really, really helpful to make sure that you're not going to be one of the failed stories, because we don't allow that. That's not happening. You're going to be a success story for sure, and get everything that you possibly could have imagined and more. The plan B, I hate how it feels like it's a secondary plan. Plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Plan E is no worse than plan A. It's just what's best at this location, what sounds best, which letter sounds best right now. So I think that redundancy is paramount. Most definitely need to think about that.
And I think what additionally it would help with is if you are somebody that is trying to convince your company or convince your boss or convince somebody like, hey, I can work from anywhere, having this in place and being like, see, I've thought about it all, will get you that trial period, will get you that ability. So those are all things to think with. Oh my goodness, such great topics. I love it. I love it covered. I don't know if I feel so positive because of the Ken Euphorics and the spirits and, of course, the tequila. Or just because it's everything, because this is so exciting. So I appreciate having you back. We will have a part 3 to this next week, which I'm looking forward to. But thank you for coming again. And that is your Tech and Tequila. So cheers to everyone. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Tech and Tequila. I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. To stay updated about all things tech and more, don't forget to visit us at our website, shelbyts.com. If you loved what you heard, remember to show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to our podcast. Your 5-star ratings and reviews mean the world to us and help us to reach more listeners just like you. So muchas gracias again for joining us with Tech and Tequila. Thank you so much. You learned a lot about tech and maybe you had a nice drink of tequila.